We've got some new questions from a bunch of folks this week, and they all have to do with what you see in front of you or similar to this. Now, I've got questions from Justin, Leon, Joe Austin, Adacosta. I apologize for that one because I know my pronunciation is terrible, and Cyberstorm. Now, we're going to get into each question individually, but really first we're going to cover everybody's question in general. Let's talk about what's going on here. We've got two MLS 1000s. Now those are from Harbinger and they feature a great setup, a built-in mixer, and the fact that they have their link system, which is their stereo link up to go to another speaker. So you can use each individually on their own, or you can use them as a set. So in my case, I'm going to go with a set. Now this video is going to focus on using mixers to make the connection. So in this particular case, I have the TrueMix 800FX new from Alto. Yes, I bought this. I didn't actually, this isn't sponsored by them. I'm working on that, but there you go. And that's also why I happen to have a TS315S. This I actually did a buyback during that thing back in 2020 from a customer. You know, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. So, but for now, until I have a replacement, this has become my favorite subwoofer. And I do really like it because the 15 is awesome. The new one is even better, but this one's phenomenal. I've added wheels to the bottom to make my life easy so I can move it around just like that. That is a really nice way to have your setup. So now that we see what's going on, what's the idea? Well, how many different ways can we hook up this system to make you feel happy with the mixer? The mixer may change because in this case, this mixer here happens to be 1/4 inch balance or unbalanced. So in this case, we're going to be using unbalanced cables. Not because I don't want to use balanced cables, just because I happen to have unbalanced cables. I have one balanced cable available to me in the studio today. Don't ask me why that worked out, but I think I sold all the rest before we closed down the showroom. But this would be the same as using an XLR. The only difference really between this and an XLR is I would never plug this into anything hot because it has to jump over the connectors. Where an XLR, I would push it and put it in hot if I knew what I was doing. So if I felt comfortable, that's the only difference between the two. Not any quality when it comes to signal or performance. For today's setup on this first setup, now remember we're going to do 3 setups, so they're going to change. The mixer is going to change for the other setups. Now in this setup here, the combination that we're going to want to have is 2 1/4 inch cables. Now in this case here, the 1/4 inch is because the mixer wants 1/4 inch and the speaker is going to also want 1/4 inch. So we're going to try and keep that as often as possible for the speaker when hooking it up that way. All we need to do now is come out of the mixer and go into channel 3 left and right here. So we're going to go in there and we're going to come out of the mixer via the mains right on top. So there you go. So main output, channel 3 in this case. Why did I choose channel 3? Because it's a stereo input. It's got a left and right on the channel 3 input. So now we're going to need 2 XLR cables to finish this off. One, we're going to want to do the stereo link between the 2 speakers. And the second one, because if you notice there's 2 XLR outputs on the speaker here. We've got the link out and we've got the direct out. So our first output is going to be the actual link output. So that's going to get us our second speaker plugged in. So we're going to go out of there and into here. Now when we turn the speaker on, there's going to be one option that we're going to have to choose to make that all happen. Then we're going to grab our second cable, and our second cable is also XLR, and that is of course for the subwoofer. So we're going to come over here. So that is called the direct out, and it is, by the way, gain controlled by the input. So that's very nice. So it'll always hold proportion. And we're going to go to in on number 1 right here. That's it for connectivity. Now for turning on, also very important. This happens to be for the most important part for any setup once you've actually plugged everything in, is turning it on. Gain levels are down, gain levels are down. We want to make sure all of that is down. We don't want to have any surprises. Even here, even though we're not using it, all our gains are down. Everything's good. Let's last one right down there. Now we're going to start with the mixer. Why? Because everything else is off. Nothing is on, breaker's on, but nothing is on. Mixer goes on because if there's any surge of power coming out of these cables for any reason at all, grounding pops or anything like that, it's not going to come through the speakers. Then we want to follow these cables, which lead us to here. So that's our next unit we're going to turn on. Why did we turn this one on first and not the other one? Because this one is sending a signal out to the second one and to the subwoofer. Now, which one do we want to turn on? Well, we're going to come across to the other side and we're going to turn that one on. Make sure that we're not going to have any backwash of anything at all going into the system. And then the subwoofer comes on last. No pops, no hisses, no crackles, no nothing. Everything is on quiet as can be. So now what we're going to do, we're going to give this guy here just about 25% because that's all we really need to get ourselves started. And then we're going to need to balance off our sound on our mixing board. So how do we do that? Well, in this case, we're going to have our Bluetooth set up. So I've done it before. I've decided to go 50% to start on the Bluetooth. We're trying to get our meters to be close between -12 and 0. That's where they're going to be dancing. Again, we have no volume really going on yet, but that's going to be turned up and adjusted there. Then I'm going to fine tune the adjustment as needed, but I need to balance off everything else when it comes to features on the actual unit. On this speaker here, because I've already done it once, there's a button right here. It says routing. I'm going to go from normal and I'm going to set that into master. Then I'm going to go to the second speaker and I'm going to set that to what they call link in mode. Link in mode is basically receiving that signal. So it's sending the secondary channel to here. So now they're running in stereo, left and right, automatically, just like that. Now, because this is the main speaker, subwoofers plug-in, I'm just going to bring the subwoofer to unity because remember, this is going to be gain controlling the whole thing. I may decide to add or subtract a little bit, but I personally, with this 15-inch and 2 of the MLS 1000s, have not had to do any adjustments beyond that. Now, with that being said, the second speaker, I've set it in the link. I don't need to set up any control options. So if you're wondering if you need to touch any of these buttons, no buttons at all. It's done. You're ready to rock and roll. You're ready to make some tunes. Now remember, I'm going to adjust this so I'm running between -12 and 0, because 0 is basically manufacturer setting. Basically, whoever made the music at the studio came out with a finished track, and that track, when played at regular volume, is at its recommended volume level, or gain levels. My apologies, gain levels. You can turn up and down the volume all you want. Where's the volume? Well, that's our main out. That's not our volume level. That's our gain levels completed out. So now you're going to adjust the overall volume based on how many people are in your bar or restaurant, or in the small hall or tent setup that you've done, or backyard party, or whatever you're using this in. That's where you're going. Now you notice I didn't actually go out and say hall, because I find halls have too high of a ceiling for this style of line array, and they tend to be large open spaces, and you tend to need larger freestanding line arrays, not the portable line arrays like this. So though you can push it, it's not necessarily what I would primarily choose for that venue. There are lots of great places to use this. I'm going to say 75% of your stuff outside of a hall, this will do the job. So there you go. That's setup number 1. If you want to know for sure, on the back of the speaker, there are settings. I do like running it as a TS310, not because they're 10-inch, just happens to be where the crossover seems to be in a happy spot. And I do not need to use the extended low frequency, because that actually, once you engage that, amazingly enough, the phase of the DSP offsets with the speakers and it actually cancels out the bass instead of enhancing it. You're going to see this amazing difference between having it, if you actually engage it in the 310 mode with these speakers, hit that button, it'll cancel out the bass. That'll bring it back to normal. So that's not a great way to boost it, that's for sure. Let's take care of answering a couple of questions while I'm on my knees praying that I'm going to be able to stand back up after all this. And this is where the questions start to come into real play about what we've been doing here. So again, the first one's from Leon, and the question is, I have both an MLS 1000 and a sub TS15 sub. He's got the newer version of this guy here, and was just wondering how to set up the mixer to the sub and to 2 MLSs. Thank you very much. There you go. That's what the first setup. I'm going to go with the first setup. New equipment, new technology, new ways of doing things better. That would definitely be the way I would go. Now, the only reason why you're going to want to do the third option, not the second, this one here is basically the option we're kind of working our way away from now. But the third one you might want to choose, because that one's where we're going to really have control over the subwoofer. If you're doing a lot of dance music, EDM, that sort of stuff, you might want to look at that setup. But primarily, the best setup for set it and leave it is the first one. And that's from Leon. So thank you, Leon, for that question. So next question is from Joe Austin. And again, he was wondering if you can use all 8 channels incoming through both speakers. So he's talking about the MLS 1000. He wants to know, can you use all the channels at the same time? So all of those channels and all of these channels. If you link them together, no. And then you'd have to come up with some creative way to mix some of those channels with some of these channels, and it would be like really, really hard. You definitely want to get yourself a mixer This mixer here, for the size of the band, if you're looking for having all 8 inputs and all your equipment all hooked up at the same time, we're talking keyboards, bass guitarists, 4 vocalists, a range of equipment all at the same time, you're going to want to look at one of these guys, the LX12. This is from Harbinger. This is the one we're going to be using in this setup here. Excellent mixer, has compressors. I was thinking of this mixer when I read your question. For your setup, this is the best way to go. Compressors for the microphones, all the rest of the equipment off to the side. It's got high Z on it. You're going to be able to run all your equipment off of this one mixer and then be able to connect this off to the speaker. Use this first instructions if you want, if you don't want to have to adjust the subwoofer, that sort of stuff. But I would definitely use this mixer off to your main speaker and then hook up. You're lucky enough to have a full band, so good for you, but I definitely want to see a mixer. Again, thanks Joe Austin for that question. So again, this is like part of saying this name because I apologize every time. Costa. Okay, so my apologies. I did Google it and it did tell me how to pronounce it, and I just can't seem to put the two together when I Google it and when I do it now. So Costa, he's got 2 15s and an 18-inch subwoofer, and this was in reference to our Alto video, so I'm hoping maybe he's got Alto, so I'm not sure, but I'm thinking. And you want a full step-by-step on how to get those 3 components set up. So there you go. I've got lots of videos on hooking up just that kind of equipment. Very, very generic, very nice and easy. If I get more Altos, I'm going to do specifically on that. We're a little short right now, but it's not away from these 3. Very important. So the second one, definitely you've bought some new technology. You're going to want to avoid what we're about to do here. This is traditional hookups, and you've seen this tons and tons of times on YouTube, and everybody talks about it. Even I did. Past the way it was. But we're going to be changing that. So there you go. Next one, very important for what to avoid if you've got new stuff. So the last question we're going to cover in this one is going to be from Cyberstorm, and that's Matthew from Quebec. That's exactly the way I like to see it. That's awesome, Matthew. Thank you very much for letting me know where you're at, just down the road from me here in Oakville, one province over. And yeah, he's using 2 subwoofers, 12-inch and 2 top 12-inch from BLG speakers. Can I mix the components, or should I stay with the same products and range during my interior and exterior services? Now, you can mix and match. There's nothing wrong. We're mixing and matching right now. You want to make sure you proportionally hit the targets. So, you know, those combinations work pretty well. You're going to have yourself a nice 3-way, and that 3rd way at the bottom is going to be carrying a sub. So that's a good setup. You're going to have your highs, your mids, and your lows all covered in that. It's okay to mix and match. Make sure the connection allows you for a maximum so you can hear everything coming off all the speakers and you're not losing anything because of that. But it's not hard. You just, once you get comfortable with the equipment you have, I've done it thousands of times where I've mixed and matched. The subwoofers are like trailers on the back of a pickup truck. They don't have to be a matching set. They just have to match the truck so this way they work properly. And that's about it. So let's get on to the next setup. Thank you for all the questions. XLR is going to be our output in today's video. There's other options, but today we're going to be focusing on the XLR outputs. But we're going to be hooking this up more traditional to show you how. So we're going to go XLR out of here into the subwoofer and out of the subwoofer to my left and right. And then we'll talk about the why we don't do that too much anymore, even though that is the cookie cutter way to hook things up. So we're going to start by putting our cables in the mixer, coming out of the mixer, and then we're going to be plugging that into the subwoofer, channels 1 and 2 here. Then we're going to need our next 2 cables, which are going to get us to our left and right. You've seen this before. It's like controllers on top or mixers on top of your table. And then you basically just go to your 1 subwoofer hookup, and then you just go to your 2nd. So we've seen this 100 times where basically out of the mixer or the controller into the subwoofer that's right next to the table, because we only have 1 sub, we put that in the middle, and we run off to our left and right. Just like that. Does this work anymore? Absolutely still works. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it, but this is where your shortcomings are. You're constantly adjusting the subwoofer gain here and then the speakers individually separately when you're doing any line adjustments around the room. Set it and leave it, but it does take you a little while to tweak the whole system. Does it work? Yes. But if you were to increase the gain on one side there, you'd have to do the same over here, and then you'd have to come over here. Where the first original setup that we did, where everything went into 1 speaker and we used smart connectivity to connect to the 2nd speaker and to the subwoofer, we were able to do adjustments on one speaker to control the overall power output of the entire system. So then we were able to just adjust our gain levels on our slider. So that's modern day technology versus older. This works with anything, and I don't have to ask you what brand stuff you have. This will just generically work for all the equipment. Now, if you don't have all the new features that you find on this speaker here, then you're probably going to fall into the third category, where you might as well take advantage of being able to control the subs separately from your main speaker. So again, this works. This is traditional, but we can do better. So remember, all the links are going to be down in the description section. That helps out this actual channel. So is that thumbnail at the very end of the video. So if you get a chance, use that if you're shopping at Guitar Center and you're looking for pricing or cabling or anything like that. Hit those links. That's what pays the bills here for us. So if you get into the store, by all means, tell them I sent you. At least that helps. Word of mouth. They know where it's coming from. So here we go. In this one, we're using this big guy here. This happens to be from Phoenix Pro. They were very nice to send one of these to me, and I actually find it quite entertaining. I do miss having a bunch of Pyle mixers that we had before, because they actually had a dedicated subwoofer channel. It was very cool. We might get it back, but you can have a look at those. They look similar, but they actually have a slider specifically just for the subwoofer. But in this case, we're going to use the PTX 400 to show what's going on. Now, on top, it's important to note that our main outputs are XLR, and our monitor output is a 1/4 inch. So that's going to require some finagling, but I'm going to show you that you have to keep an open mind when you're wiring things. So for this to work out, we're going to go to the traditional new setup of having both wires. Now, I could have ran a wire to each side. That's not a big deal. If I had only XLR cables, I would have gone one XLR to that speaker, one XLR to this speaker. No big deal. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use 1/4 inch to female XLRs. This is going to be our main outs. For our subwoofer control, we're going to go 1/4 inch to male XLRs. Now, how's that going to work? Well, let's do it. Remember, the output of the mixer is XLR. So that means they're male. We're going to need some female connectors for that. That's going to be these guys here. We need 2 of those. We want 1/4 inch because we want to run into channel 3. It's going to be the best way to get in there. We're going to do that right now. We're going to go right in here, just like that. If I only had XLRs, I could have gone both into channel 1 and channel 2, but I wouldn't have had a stereo signal. I just would have had all the functionality of linking it up. But in this case, I'm going to keep my stereo, because now I'm going to take these 2 XLR connections, these females. I'm going to put them in the mixer where it says main out. So now my main out is connected, no problem, and it's connected into my left and right channel, so I'm going to keep a stereo signal coming across. That's going to be awesome. That's all done. That's ready to go. Now, in this case, I want to control the subwoofer separately from the mains. So that's where my next cable comes into play. So now, I can either use a 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch, which I can do, or I can use this cable, which happens to be a 1/4 inch to a male XLR. This shows you all the different ways that you can use your cables and the best kind of cables to get the whole setup. It doesn't matter. If I had a 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch, I would have been just as happy. But this gives me an opportunity to use a cable that sometimes is my only option. Depending on the subwoofer I have, this one's a combo jack. Sometimes you only have an XLR input. And now this is going to plug into the monitor right on top there. Now what that's going to do, it's going to allow me to use the aux controls, the monitor outputs, because I've hooked into the monitor. So instead of using this as a stage monitor, this is now going to be my sub, of course, which it is. And I'm going to use the monitor output to drive it. So the more I add my monitor signal from my aux 1, it'll feed the subwoofer. So whatever my music channels are going to be, I can decide how much of it's going to go to the subwoofer. And at any point in time, I can turn it up and down. So if I'm running music, well, I just can turn it up. If I'm just, running Bluetooth, that sort of thing, I can just control it independently off the mixing board. That's how you use your monitor out, your aux, to drive your subwoofer and give you independent volume control. I really like how that setup works. It just works out really well, makes things super simple to use. And the nice part about this is you'll only have sub on the channels you want. So any microphones that you don't want to have any subwoofers on because people are just talking, presenting, giving speeches, that sort of thing, it won't be there. So regardless what type of venue you're at, there's always a good reason to not have that sub on, and you don't have to manually turn it off. It'll just won't be there. So there you go. There's 3 great ways to get those MLS 1000s all hooked up to a subwoofer. The TS 15-inch is a really great match for this setup. Now, if you were to go off and buy 2 subs, hey, that's your thing, right? If you're going to max it out. But I think this does a really good job to fill in the whole missing bottom end that you may want to add to. And it comes down to what you're going to play. So don't think it's always needed. It's what you're going to play and what you'd like to have. Start off with the 2 actual line arrays. Move on from there. These guys are awesome. In their category, they're definitely the best thing you're going to buy. By far. By far. So there you are. Now, outside of that, there's not much more to add. You can certainly toss in all the comments and questions down below. Let me know if there's any stores that you want to see this set up at. I'll reach out to them. I'm talking about Guitar Centers because this setup's pretty cool setup. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.